Hi, I'm Lim of woodprodesigns. I come from a multi-generational family of woodworkers, and today I'd like to show you something my grandfather designed years ago. If you'd like to build it, I'd like to show you how. So let's get started. We'll start out by arranging the templates with the grain and carefully trace two pieces for each template. I found it always helps to rough cut the pieces into more manageable sizes. Be sure to leave a little room outside the line, and we'll trim them down on the next step. We want to trim each piece close to the line. The closer you can get to the line without touching it, the better, so the router has less to remove. After we have all the pieces trimmed close, it's time to start applying the double stick tape to the template and the template to the wood. It's very important to avoid having the template hanging over the edge of the wood. Press firmly so the template doesn't move when you start trimming it with the flush trim router bit. You can use a router or router table with a flush trim bit. I recommend using push pads for safety. Don't press too hard against the bit. Just be sure the router bearing rides against the edge of the template to assure a smooth, clean edge. Take your time removing the template to avoid damaging it, since you'll want to reuse it later. I like to use a wide chisel and work my way slowly down the edge. Measure 11 inches from the small end of the armrest and make a mark. Use a drill press and drill a 1/4 inch hole at that mark. Be sure to use a fence to ensure the holes are centered. Now flip the armrest around and drill a 1/4 inch hole, 3/4 inches from the end. Next, we'll use a brad point drill bit to find the hole center. The holes come in two sizes, 1/4 inch for the socket screws and 5/16 for the connector nuts. The written instructions explain which hole is which size. Now we'll carefully drill the holes using the same bits we used to mark the hole centers. Try to hold the drill 90 degrees perpendicular, straight up and down, to the surface of the wood. That way, the parts will connect together easier later on. Stack your parts to make sure there are 6 pairs. Install a router bushing into the router base and set the maximum bit depth to 7/8 of an inch, since this particular template is 3/8 thick. That will leave you a 1/2 inch deep mortise. Now on to mortising. Identify which you want for your left piece and which you want for the right piece, since they will get mortised on opposite sides from one another. To avoid mortises that are too big, use plenty of double stick tape when applying the template and press the template down firmly. Use clamps to secure the piece to a sturdy work surface. Don't start too deep, go slow, and use multiple passes, setting each pass a little deeper. I'd recommend about an 1/8 inch deeper with each pass. Be sure to clean out all the sawdust left in the mortises between each pass. That's important for a smooth mortise. The finished slats will be about 3/8 inch thick, so set your bandsaw fence to around 7/16 from the blade. Notice I clamped a temporary wood fence to ensure the pieces I'm cutting are held firmly against the bandsaw fence as I cut them. Move the pieces through in a slow, steady pace and be sure to use a push stick for safety. The braces in the seat front will be 1 3/4 inches wide. Cut the seat front 18 3/8 inches long. Cut the braces 21 1/2 inches long. Be sure to sand the edges after you have them cut. Set up a stop block on the bandsaw to cut the 3/4 inch depth of the rabbet for the braces. Then flip it over end to end and cut the other end. Pay attention to keep the same face on the fence. To finish cutting the rabbets, set the miter saw cut depth only deep enough for the notch and use the stop block to ensure it isn't more than 3/4 inches from the end. Grab the two seat frame sides and the seat front. Round the bottom two edges of the seat front but not the ends. For the sides, round the long edges but not the edge that meets the seat front. Round edges of all other parts except the back slats. That comes later. Now let's countersink the seat slats. I set up a stop block on my drill press for mine. If you use a regular drill instead, be sure to measure 3/8 inch from the ends and make a mark. Then find the width, center, and make an intersecting mark. Drill at that location. Be sure the depth is sufficient for the tapered head screws to sit just below the surface of the wood. Rather than adjusting my stop block on the drill press, I opted to use a drill to countersink the braces. On the outside fronts of the seat sides, measure up from the bottom 3/8 and 1½ inches and make marks. Then measure from the front 3/8 inch and make intersecting marks. Drill and countersink holes at those locations. Next, line up the seat front with the seat side. While holding them even, use a 1/8 inch drill bit and drill through the countersunk holes in the seat sides approximately 1.5 inches into the ends of the seat front. Grab the back slats. Make a light mark 1/2 inch from the ends on each one. This will serve as a depth gauge when the chair is being assembled. Prior to marking, I spent a little time sanding down the back slats in tiny increments to get them to fit tight into the mortises. I was careful not to take off too much at a time. This is one of those steps you want to sneak up on it slowly. Once I was sure the thickness and the width were correct, I rounded over the edges of the slats. I used a block and a hammer to gently get it started into the mortise. I used the blocks so that I didn't damage the other end of the slat. I then grabbed some clamps and spaced them out so that both sides of the frame would fit into the clamps, and gently laid the frame side with the slats started onto its back and snugged the clamps. It helps if you have plenty of clamps, but if you only have two, you can make that work. It just takes longer. As you begin tightening the clamps, do so by alternating the sequence in which you tighten them. Pay attention to how square the slats are within the frame sides. If needed, you may need to use another clamp diagonally to pull it into square. This can take a little while, but that's okay. We're not in a race. The important thing is to make sure the slats stay square with the frame as you tighten the clamps. Remember those light marks we made on the slats 1/2 inch from the ends? Once those marks are close to the frame, measure the distance between the two inside faces of the frame pieces. Our goal is to have the space just slightly over 20 inches, maybe 20 1/16. Now take the finished component and set it aside for a moment. To assemble the seat frame, we'll use the 1 5/8 No. 6 tapered head screws. Carefully align the seat frame side to the face of the seat frame front. Slowly drive in the screws using a No. 2 Phillips screwdriver or screwdriver bit with a drill or impact driver. Please note, however, if you opt to use a power tool to install the screws, use extra caution and do not over-tighten them. While they're strong, they can be broken. If that happens, you may need to make another seat frame front and start over. Allow the first seat slat to hang over the edge of the seat frame front about 1/8 inch. Check both ends of the seat slat to be sure it sits about 1/16 inch shy of the outside edge of the seat frame sides. On one end of the slat, using the existing hole in the slat as a guide, use an 1/8 inch drill bit and pilot drill a hole a little over 1 inch deep into the seat frame side. Make sure there's no sawdust in the hole, then using a 1 inch No. 6 tapered head screw, fasten the slat to the seat frame side. Make sure the seat frame sides are parallel and move to the other end of the slat and repeat the process. I temporarily use one of the seat slats as a spacer between the slats. At this point, it may be a good idea to cut a scrap piece of wood and clamp it between the tails of the seat frame sides. Be sure it's the same length as the seat front. This ensures that the seat assembly stays the same width as you fasten the rest of the seat slats. After you have all the seat slats fastened to the seat frame, set it aside. Now it's time to install the front braces. Get the main frame assembly and lay it down on the table, face up. Measure up from the bottom of the frame assembly 3.5 inches and make a light mark. Make another mark at 8.5 inches. These will be the locations where the bottom of the front braces will attach to the main frame assembly. Use a bar or pipe clamp to ensure a tight fit. Using the holes in the ends of the brace, use an 1/8 inch drill bit and drill pilot holes into the frame assembly a little over 1.25 inches deep. Fasten the brace to the frame assembly using number 6 1.25 inch tapered head screws. Remember, don't over tighten them. Repeat the process for the second brace. The single back brace will be fastened 4.5 inches from the narrow end of the back legs on the outer curved portion. Pay attention to which way you have the legs. It's easy to get them backwards. Clamping is important before we pilot drill and fasten the brace onto the back leg. This ensures a tight fit. Be sure you use number 6 1.25 inch tapered head screws and don't over tighten them. You can apply whatever finish you like. Personally, I'm a big fan of Danish oil, and my favorite is the brand Tried and True. I found it to be a very forgiving finish. I know some of you may prefer a different finish or a different method of applying the finish. Well, since I'm not a professional finisher, I'm not going to pretend my ways are best. And I like to wait at least 24 hours before assembly. Next, it's time to begin the assembly. I plan to make more videos of other projects as well, so I guess I'm supposed to ask you to like and subscribe. There's a reason it's called Dad's Rocker. On my father's side of the family, we didn't say Grandpa or Granddad. We said Dad. I don't know why. That's just the way it was. My family were sawmill people and builders. Before I was born, Dad lost his right leg in a sawmill accident. He eventually sold the business, but that didn't slow him down. He built a wood shop behind his house, and it was there he spent much of his time designing and building all kinds of pieces. One day, when I was a kid, I was at my grandparents' house with my dad. I was in the living room watching cartoons, as kids do, while they were at the kitchen table talking. I kept overhearing them discussing how something needed to pivot where the hole should be and how big the pieces had to be. So during a commercial break, curiosity got the best of me and I wandered over to see what they were working on. They were moving pieces of wood around the table, trying to figure something out. And for some reason, that moment sticks with me. Maybe because the design was so unusual. But the commercials ended, so I had to head back to the living room for my cartoons. Later, when Dad finally built the chair, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Out of everything he built, it was my favorite. Over the years, he made quite a few of them for family, friends, and others. His chairs ended up all over the U.S. One of them was even on display at the Forest Heritage Center, a museum celebrating the region's history, forestry, and woodworking craftsmanship. Sadly, when I was 17, Dad passed away, and I never got one of his chairs. While I was in my early 20s, I stopped by Bill Murphy's shop. He was one of Dad's closest friends. When I walked in, I saw one of the rockers over in the corner. I said, "Bill, I see you built one of Dad's rocking chairs." He said, "No, your granddad gave that to me years ago." Well, realizing Dad had personally made it, I asked Bill, "What would you take for it?" Because I really wanted to buy it. Bill said, "Son, your granddad was my best friend, and there's no amount of money that could buy that chair. But if you want to come back with a sheet of plywood, we'll make a pattern so you can build your own." So I did that. About a week later, I went back with the plywood, and Bill and I cut out a set of templates. Well, I stayed for a few hours visiting with him, and I could see exactly why Dad held him in such high regard. When it came time to leave, I carried the templates to my truck and slid them in the bag. When I turned around to thank him, he was holding Dad's chair. He said, "You better take this with you." I said, "Bill, knowing what that chair means to you, I can't take it." He said, "Son, I can't think of anyone in this world your granddad would rather have it than you. Now put it in your truck before I change my mind." I just looked at him. The lump in my throat made it impossible to speak. We shook hands. I loaded the chair and I drove away. To this day, every chair I build or teach someone else to build makes me relive that memory. And now you know why this chair is so special to me. Not just because Dad designed it, but it's also a story about friendship and the sacrifice Bill made to honor his friend by making sure his friend's grandson would have a chair his dad built with his own hands and would treasure it the same way he did when Dad gave it to him. And I hope that if Dad could see how his legacy is living on, he'd be proud. Now, years later, I'm a dad. Yeah, that's what my grandkids call me too. And I hope that one day they'll look back with the same fondness I had for my dad. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will feel that spark and say, "I'm going to build that chair." I hope you've enjoyed building this chair with me, and I hope that you might decide there's room in yours or someone's house you know for Dad's folding rocker. If you think you'd like to build it, there's a link below where you can get the templates, hardware, or if building's not really your thing, but you'd still like to have one, you can get a disassembled version of it, flat packed, and sent to you. All you need to do is put whatever finish you want on it and assemble it. And if you'd like to get a smaller version for your child or grandkid, well, guess what? We offer that too. The flat pack version comes with the hardware, Allen wrenches, and even the Loctite. And in case you're wondering, that dark colored rocker, well, that's the one that Dad gave to Bill all those years ago.